right, welcome everybody to the Disruptors. The future of work is now. I am Alexandria. I am one of the co-founders of the Disruptors, and I have my co-founder Jasleen with me. And quick introduction about me: I am a leadership coach. I have been in leadership for over 15 years. I come out of the therapy world originally, fell face first into tech, and then used coaching to bridge that world. We now run the Disruptors, which is a job board that supports people from underrepresented communities to get jobs they can thrive in with companies that are prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm going to turn it over to Jasleen so she can introduce herself.
Yeah, so I'm Jasleen. I'm a career coach for mostly women who identify as high potential in the tech space. My educational background is actually in psychology, so I could really be selfish and pick Dr. Kerriann's brain on organizational psych stuff because my undergrad was in IO Psych.
Nice.
And so then I worked in corporate HR for 10 years, and I'm excited to be here to talk about this today. Heart-centered approach to your organization. And just as people are joining, maybe just let us know in the chat that you're here and let us know where you're joining from and how cold it is where you are. Because I just want to say, if you think it's cold where you are, it cannot be as cold as where I am right now in Canada. It's going to be minus 30 Celsius today. It's going to be minus 36 Celsius tomorrow, which is about minus 32 Fahrenheit. So let us know, how cold is it where you are and where are you joining from? And so I'll pass it on over to Dr. Kerriann to tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this DEIA space.
Thank you, Jasleen. Thank you, Alexandria. It is so nice to be with you guys again. I will start off by letting you know I'm in South Florida. So
much warmer than we are then.
Much warmer than where you are. It's in the 70s here. So it's warmer here. But yeah, my name is Dr. Kerriann Peart, and my pronouns are she, her. They couldn't all fit on the screen in my tag, but those are my pronouns. And I got into this DEI space. I tell people I think I've pretty much just been in it my whole life as it pertains to living in the United States. It has been a DEIA adventure for the past 20 plus years. So yeah, that's pretty much how I've had to navigate cross-cultural aspects of my identity, particularly in the workspace, work ethics styles, and navigating communication structures and disclosures about who I am and what the value is that I bring to a space given my levels of divergence. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
And I realized, I think I said heart-centered, but what I meant was human-centered. So
no problem. No problem.
So the human
that's part of the process. Yeah. Yeah.
The human-centered culture that we're really trying to create. Yes. And that's really around the inclusion piece. So I know a lot of people get confused because we keep changing the acronyms, but there's always a reason behind why we might add a particular letter to really focus in on something. And so I noticed, Dr. Kerriann, in your title, you are a DEIA specialist. And so we've seen DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've seen some of us have seen DEIJ, the J being standing for justice, or DEIB to really focus in on belonging. And so I'm curious, what does the A stand for and what does that mean for you?
Right. So for the space I'm operating in now, it is talking about accessibility. So fundamentally breaking down access. So it's about how your organization's culture and dynamic really creates opportunities and access for its staff and professionals working with the organization to develop, right? So back to what you were mentioning about the human-centered approach or human-centered design, it's really thinking critically about how spaces allow for individuals with all of their divergence and nuances to develop and grow and thrive via access in the ways that they deem valuable and necessary for them. So access for me may mean being able to sign up for a particular type of coaching program versus access for another colleague of mine may simply mean the type of computer desk that they're going to need to work from, right? So access spans a spectrum of many things. It's not just getting into an organization, but how you are able to level up and navigate that organization once you're in there.
I love that. In my HR experience, I found that we would focus on the lower performers and the high performers or the high potential employees a lot.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, what you're ending up doing is, you're promoting and advancing and giving access to special opportunities to those with the most privilege. And so even when you're looking at DEI from one aspect, either from the recruiting point or, in terms of onboarding, et cetera,
Right.
you have to look at your whole talent pipeline, how you're developing that talent pipeline, and who has access to the resources at each stage of that pipeline. And so I love that you focus in on that to really understand, not just from the point of view of the underrepresented group of folks who have disabilities or who are differently abled,
Right.
but also from, if you are Black, Indigenous, person of color, a woman, any sort of marginalized group, LGBTQ plus, what limitations are there in the organization, or what sort of invisible rules or invisible blockers exist to those resources. So
Yes.
love that focus. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your work and what a human first workplace even is. Like, how would you define that?
Sure. So one of the posts I remember making some time back on LinkedIn, when you randomly just have a thought, you're like, this should be a LinkedIn post. I had a little blog post up, and based on the work I was doing at the time, recognized that DEI work is really coming back to the humanity aspect of who we are, how we are, why we are in all of the spaces that we're navigating, not just work. So for me, this human-centered, human design type of focus is fundamentally acknowledging the fact that at our core, when we strip everything away, human is what we're dealing with. Human is what we're talking about. Human is what we are supporting, right? And tapping into. So when a lot of people say to me, DEI doesn't involve me. It doesn't involve me. I'm a straight person. I'm a man. I'm white and whatever kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, but at the end of the day, you're human, correct? It's like, oh, yes. So just fundamentally being human and all of the wonderful assets and strengths and gifts and talents, because I always try to come from this asset-based side of things instead of the deficit-based side of things, which we've focused on for far too long in our societies, and think about, all right, great, you're human. What are the experiences that you've had? And how have those experiences taught you something, helped to support you in something or someone else that we can then lean into as assets to create these dynamic and culturally responsive work environments and social settings. So it's really leaning into the human side of things, because we have, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for instance. We all have those needs, regardless of age, religion, nationality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So fundamentally focusing on the human is the way that I push for this work to be done in DEI, and DEIA, J, B, et cetera, et cetera. But because that's the most common element. When we whittle everything else away, that's the most common element. And so that is what I champion for in moving the work. So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. DA work is coming back to humanity.
Yeah.
And I feel like, in a way, that's so liberating, whether you're an underrepresented group or you are someone in the system that has the most privilege and was given the most benefits, because sometimes even when you are privileged, that gives you permission to
Mm.
be a human and not be a robot in the workplace. Because the old style of leadership, the command and control,
Yes.
has been proven scientifically, and I know you can attest to that, has been proven scientifically not to work for anyone,
Mm-mm.
not just underrepresented groups. So this human-centered approach, this permission of, DEI is really about coming back to humanity.
Mhm.
It's just such a bigger calling in that way. I love it.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the first thing that's forgotten about too often, right? Like we forget that we're humans. And I think that it happens so often in the tech space because there is so much computerized language and that's normalized in referring to one another. I don't have the bandwidth for this, or I need to recharge like I'm a battery. And like how that affects how we even perceive ourselves, let alone how we perceive others.
Yes.
And just the dismantling of humanity that comes in, and how easy it is to then treat people as computers versus human, and the failure in that as a leader.
The plugging in and the plugging out, which I just started this series on, I forget what network it's on, but it's called Severance. I invite you guys to check out that series because it is sort of a metaphor. I don't want to spoil anything in the show, but it is really sort of a metaphor for how we plug into work and plug out as if we aren't human.
Yeah.
And so it's really coming back to that humanity. Yeah.
And it's funny that we say that, because I was just earlier, I was talking to Alexandria about the fact that people don't even realize how traumatized they are.
Yes.
And that is those are the groups of folks, particularly in the professional space, that I am working with.
Yes.
Like, do you recognize that you have been or currently are going through traumatic experience at work, that your workspace is toxic, that your workspace's challenges are not conducive to your well-being? And people are like, but this is just work. That's how it's supposed to be. No.
That normalization of trauma and what has been normalized as acceptable, just because it is doesn't mean it should be. And being able to challenge that and be like, hey, but like as a human, I need this.
Correct.
Or as a human, I see that this person is struggling or they need extra support. And being able to show up in that humanity and prioritize those needs so that we can get back to work and we can produce and we can thrive in a space, because we do. That's what we want as humans, right? We want to be valuable. We want to produce. We want those things.
Absolutely.
But we have to be in a space in which we can.
Yes.
And I think it goes back to what we've always been saying every Wednesday, which is DEI really comes back to your why. And so I think it's really hard for people to really to identify their why when they haven't healed from the trauma that they aren't even aware that they went through. And I can attest to this because being in the corporate world for almost a decade, there was a lot of relational trauma. There was a lot of, but I was in the HR space. And so we were the people. We were the ones who were really trying our best for everyone to make it an inclusive organization. And I worked for one of the best, companies, in my opinion, still looking back at really walking the talk in those spaces. But even when you're doing that, if you don't have the right leadership in place from a business standpoint, if it's not integrated with the business, if people haven't healed from their own trauma, because there are still things now, like 15 years later, that I'm unpacking and thinking, oh my goodness, I've internalized that. And now I have to unpack it, process it, heal it, so that I can be more productive, not just so that we can be, like get back to our roots of just, not focusing on just work, but it really helps us connect to our purpose and why we show up to work, or if we're in the right role, because as a leader, you don't want your employees to be in the wrong role.
That right role piece. Oh, I could talk for days about the right role piece. What cringes for me when I look at certain things in the space, and people are applying for jobs or job descriptions, because I have to vet those too when it comes to creating organizational culture. and the wording of these things and this whole concept of being the right fit annoys me. It really, and I'm just going to use annoyance as the polite term of this audience. But it really gets me thinking, you know, because this whole idea of you pitching your organization in a way that now requires me to think about me being the fit for your organization, I think starts the whole minimization process, right? And it's like, okay, well, this feels okay for me in this job description. This looks okay over here, but I'm not okay with this part. Does that mean I'm not the right fit?
Right.
You know, what is why the lack of inclusivity?
Yes.
That organizations are not willing to say, here's what we stand for, yada, yada, yada. Here are the requirements. Please apply with it. You know, are you interested? Apply with it. What does this need to say? If you think you're the right fit, come on. And
yes, and that's why one of my pet peeves is when people overcomplicate the hiring process, right? That's one of the things we're out here to do, is really simplify it, because
correct,
the ego becomes so involved. This again has been scientifically studied, the idiosyncratic rater effect.
Yep.
That rating says more about you as a human than it does about the fit. And then when we focus on fit, what we're really saying is you need to sacrifice your authenticity and hold yourself to my idiosyncratic, you know, little quirks, little ways of working, all these kind of things. But also the business ends up suffering, because now I have a disengaged employee. Now I have someone who's now dealing with maybe anxiety and depression, who's calling in sick, who's not showing up for work, and then comes in the command and control again with, okay, well, now I got to rein it in, and we got to start penalizing people for calling in sick. We got to start laying people off and scaring them and into doing their job, which it's just not the way in 2020.
It's not the way. It's not the way. It's, and there's certain things that I tell people are setup phrases, you know, setup words. It's a word or phrase that's about to set you up for failure, right?
Yeah.
Right fit is one. We're a family is another one.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Two of them out there that we'll go to. One last point before you guys.
We have no boundaries, really. That's what that is. We have no boundaries.
Yes. One last comment I want to make on this point around workplace trauma. I think Harvard Business Review or Forbes, I can't remember who it was, launched an article a few weeks ago about it taking 22 months for someone to recover from a single work trauma experience. And when you think about that, as you're saying, Jasleen, there's still things that you're unpacking when you're now, you know, however many years from a particular event. And when you think about how people are moving from job to job just so they can keep up with paying the bills, etc., and never really processing through a particular workplace trauma event, because we're only talking about one event, much less the compounded events of traumas in a workplace, it lends to a lot of the things that we're now like all of a sudden surprised about when we talk about the Great Resignation, high levels of burnout, issues around the suicide rates going up across different populations.
Yes.
You know, a lot of this stuff is starting from work. Our workspaces are not safe. They're just not. So I did want to throw that out for folks to really think about what you are feeling in your workspace and how you keep telling yourself, I just have to pay the bills. I just have to push through, you know.
Because that is keeping you in survival mode.
Correct.
And you cannot heal until you move to thriving mode.
Correct.
And that has been my experience. Any sort of trauma I've had, whether at work or in my personal life, the anxiety or the depression or whatever came after it didn't happen until everything was safe.
Absolutely. Likewise.
Once I felt safe, that's when everything just kind of hit the fan. And I said, what? I'm through it now. I did it. I'm safe.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
So why is it that now? And so many people, when they're stuck in that survival mode, the only way, and I think this kind of speaks to my next question, which is about the red flags. And so maybe one of the red flags is burnout.
Yep.
Mhm.
Right. So look up those symptoms of burnout, right? If you're burning out as a leader first,
Mhm.
that's a red flag. If employees are calling sick, if employees are, and so what do you think, Dr. Kerriann? What are some of the other symptoms or red flags? Because we're looking at this as a system. And that's why I love your area of research, your area of work, because we're not just looking at the individual or the interpersonal relationships. We're looking at the organization at them living in a broader culture. And so when we're looking at it really from that broader lens, what are some of those red flags or symptoms that people are seeing on the surface?
Yeah. So what you see on the surface from an organizational standpoint, when things are just not running so smoothly, and people are going to be like, no, but that's a norm. Meetings. Having too many meetings is a sign of systematic failure. It's like, glitch, Houston, we have a problem. When you have an organizational culture where it's a meeting every striking day, back to back, and this kind of thing, poor management, poor leadership structures are at play, right? And a lot of people will be like, but that's normal. Here's what that then lends to when you're thinking about how I, as an individual, function in those environments. I don't eat lunch. I forget to go to the bathroom. I may be having upset stomach on the way to work, those anxiety knots, right? I have these incessant migraines that are happening. I'm now missing days at the gym. I'm out of shape. It manifests in so many ways that it is not even cute. I can't decorate this for folks. Right? Even with another sign within organizations. So those excessive meetings is like a no-no. When you also see, to the point of access, when you noted, Jasleen, earlier about certain people getting the access versus others on a consistent basis with these half-assed justifications, another red flag. Things, Houston, we have some serious problems. You'll also recognize, too, in some organizations, the ways in which leadership itself is made up, right? When you look at the quote unquote leadership tier, what those folks look like, because we're highly visual, right? How those individuals engage each other on that tier and engage those not in that tier or the lack thereof engagement. Other things that should flag for you that these folks aren't walking the talk. Because remember, black and white can communicate all sorts of stuff all day. But when you're in the space and you're seeing and feeling the operations of things and it's not matching up, some flags, some real flags. I always tell people 3 things. What does it look like for you, sound like for you, and feel like for you? And if you are cringing at all of those, it's a moment where you need to think about how to pivot.
Yeah, I would agree. Like all those are definitely red flags. And the thing that I want to say about the meetings specifically is you can have meetings, but they need to be effective meetings. And if you're having meetings about having meetings, you're not having effective meetings. You're not communicating effectively. You don't have clear outcomes, and you don't have the structure in place to actually make them actionable.
Correct.
And so noticing how many meetings are we having? Do we have to have these meetings? Could it have been an email? I think that's an important question to be asking. If you say, oh, well, I couldn't have effectively communicated that over an email. Okay. Is there a communication problem?
Right.
Is there an understanding problem? Are you measuring the right things? How would you know if you had the impact? And really evaluating what does an effective meeting look like and feel like within your organization?
Correct.
One that I'd like to add to is, are you in a mindset where you're having to revert to command and control leadership, or are you leveraging human psychology and what helps us thrive?
I want to lean into that. I really appreciate you bringing that up, because in some other conversations and workshops that I do, I talk about leadership versus management. Remember, I remember teaching this too when I was lecturing as a professor, and folks would would conclude that, oh, we don't actually have many leaders, and I'd be like, yeah, you're right. Leaders are folks who inspire and are able to activate inner leaders in others, right? They are individuals who create a level playing field so that the nuances, the assets of individuals can be seen, valued, and activated for whatever level of execution of work needs to be done, right? Those are leaders. Leaders activate, give vision, give inspiration.
Yes.
And work alongside.
Yes.
Leaders, right? Managers, it's this tug of war, right? They are telling you the command, as you're saying, Jasleen, they're telling you this is what needs to be done, and they're pulling you along to do it. And people think that that's leadership. That's not leadership, right? That's not it. A lot of good leaders go unrecognized because they're part of the pack. They're not separate from. And I think the ways in which many of our organizations have been structured, when we say the word leader, we're thinking the person on top. And dare I say that person is really just a poster child? I don't offend anybody.
I think it depends on the organization. Like, how are they showing up as a leader? Are they showing up as a leader, which means that they are empowering everyone around them to show up in their strengths and in their ads, right? And that's, again, the conversation about, be a fit versus be an ad, because you want to be able to cultivate a full spectrum of strengths. And being aware of what you don't have, and your team should then fill that, right? Everybody has an ad that they can give. And so are you a poster child? Are you playing at being a leader because you hold that title and you're like, I have the title, that's good enough.
Right.
Or are you showing up in leadership and creating opportunities for everybody around you to grow and to show up in their strength and their knowledge and be able to be innovative and collaborative? Are you showing up in upholding their humanity and what they add to the organization?
And I want
to into that, Alexandria, as you're saying that showing up and doing these things and cultivating and activating and inspiring, the word is consistently.
Yes.
And not defaulting to, okay, I've done it now I can go back on top and tell them this. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something about the poster child, because I don't want, if you're a leader who's also an underrepresented group, you don't need to feel guilty about that, because you might be ready to show up and be consistent and remove barriers. But you can be the poster child in the sense that, yes, I got to this management level, so now this was the only way I was going to get a pay raise.
Right.
Because, you know, in pyramid organizations, you're an individual contributor, whether you're an engineer, whether you're another sort of tech-focused person, you realize at a certain point, I'm not going to get more money unless I become a leader. And so they're the people who come into those positions for those reasons. And then there are the tokenized, and again, we're not trying to offend anybody, but if this is your experience and you feel like you've been tokenized, because I'm passionate about this, because a lot of my clients are female, like women leaders.
Right.
And so they've been put in positions where they're supposed to be strategic, where they're supposed to be leading a lot of people management.
Correct.
And a lot of the women are trying to do this proper type of leadership, where a meme that comes to my mind is, you're not a leader until you've created a leader who can create another leader who can create another leader, right? It's not about you always having to be present. That's the ego-based leadership.
Yeah.
But I have so many clients who are doing all the right things and working on their personal development. No matter what, if they're outnumbered in the room, they're the first of their group to be in the room, and they happen to have different values and different identities and different ways of communicating, different culture, etc. And they're trying to bring that lens to a leadership team that has been operating the way it's been operating for decades, right? And like just inheriting the same problems as the previous generation. It can be really hard because I have a lot of underrepresented clients who are at director level, and they have been told, you are VP potential, you are senior whatever potential. But they're like, I don't know if I want to do it. I know I can do it. I know I'm talented enough to do it, but nobody's taking me seriously. I'm having to work twice as hard. I have to perform again and again and again, where my male colleague or my white colleague is automatically just given free rein to do whatever they want, where I have to bring in all this data, and it's just not always fair. And so if you're feeling like you have been made the poster child, or you're like trying to post as, a manager because you haven't been given the leadership training, you can come to us for one. We're all in the space and we can help you understand what the levers are for change in your unique situation, because it's always different, right? And sometimes it means leaving, right?
Yes.
Sometimes people aren't ready to hear it, and sometimes it takes a while, but often it is about positioning you for somewhere, an organization where you will thrive. And that's why we're working on both ends here at Disruptors to help people understand where the barriers, where the biases are, so they can get to work, but also help organizations understand you're hiring diverse talent. You need to understand really what DEI means, not just for these underrepresented groups, but for everyone. So we're bringing human to the heart of what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, remaining in that human-centeredness and why it's important, and I guess making the business case for it, right? Because we're still in that space in which we have to make the business case that this is important and not just the right thing to do. Having having diverse teams creates innovation, creates sustainability, creates all of the things that companies want for themselves. And creating those environments in which you are empowering all of your leadership team then empowers all of their teams, and you can do wonderful, beautiful things. But that's where you have to start catching the bias, which is why we're doing a whole series next month on catching bias in the interview process, catching bias within your organization. And your favorite, Dr. Kerriann, we're going to talk about looking for culture add, not culture fit. And so if that's something that you think might be happening at your organization, make sure you join us next month. But I want to move into, we talked about the red flags and symptoms. How could you correct those? What would be some easy things that people could do to start correcting when they see those red flags showing up in their organization?
Sure. So I'll start with the individual first. So things like the headaches, the fatigue, the not being interested, all the things that people go through, which are then lead up to a diagnosis of burnout or a diagnosis of something else, which can actually be very severe, right? Because people get so sick and don't realize that they're getting sick. And I've had personal experience with that, given my work environments. So you have those pieces, really leaning into the opportunity to take the mental health days, using your sick time, right? A lot of us try and bank up sick time or try and bank up vacation so you can have a big blowout 2 weeks of some time. And then you have 2 weeks in a whole year and then have to come back and sit for a whole another year before you can, think about the utility of that. Really leaning into the opportunities that you have to use other time. And I know for some organizations, it takes forever to rack up vacation time, but figuring out how to take time out for yourself is critical. I would even push people to really, and I'm saying push because a lot of people are sitting and just kind of, oh, I'll get to it. I'll wait and see. And that phrase, wait and see, I cannot.
Mm.
Another one that really just,
Mm.
there are coaches out here. You have 3 sitting right in front of you, right here, right? Pick one, right? Pick one and run with a coach. Go. You do not have to be doing these things alone. You don't have to create your professional strat plan alone. I tell people all the time, have a professional strat plan. That's something I work with people on.
I want to highlight that one right there. Whether you are a job seeker who's moving into something, or an individual contributor, or you're a leader of a team who needs support doing this and you don't have it in your organization, there are tons of supports outside of your organization. Like, you're not alone. You can Google it. There's 3 right here. We'll make it super easy for you, but get the support you need. I think that's super important.
There's so much support out there. So much support. I would then, for organizations that are just, having all these meetings and like, really take stock, do a cultural audit.
Yeah.
Do a cultural audit. To the points that were made earlier, what are these meetings benefiting us? How is there work that actually is done after the meeting? Are people feeling empowered and inspired after these meetings? Or is it just another roll eyes, okay, let me just go to this again to hear what we talked about 6 months ago and no traction has been developed?
Yes.
Like, what are we really meeting for?
Yeah.
And I would even challenge organizations to think about creative and dynamic ways to meet. They're being now more so in a virtual space. A lot of organizations have had to think about how they can get the information that they need without having formal meeting structures. Something that a lot of folks need to think through a little bit more, that you don't need to have this hour block of a conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be, having an open room on Zoom for people to drop in during a lunch break and say, hey, here's a thought about something, get idea. It can be very informal.
Yeah.
More conducive to hearing people's strengths and assets than these.
Yeah. I think that's where some people get confused too, because when they hear the advice of, okay, don't have a meeting for no reason, that doesn't mean that you are then packing your meetings with a overwhelming agenda, because you also have to have intentional meetings where there is deliberate space. And if you're creating a deliberate space to check in from a cultural audit perspective and it's quiet, that is a red flag. That, a topic that I know, Dr. Kerriann, you're very passionate about, is that you don't have psychological safety.
Don't have it. You don't have it.
Because employees have in the past brought things up and felt dismissed, felt invalidated, were punished even for bringing it up, being seen as not a team player, someone who asks too many questions, someone who challenges the status quo too much, not playing the game. Not playing the game that wasn't designed for them to begin with, by the way, but not playing the game, right? And so people get deflated, and that's where they get into like this sort of quiet quitting trend, where it's a trend. It's been around forever. People have been disengaging from work forever. We just have a new word for it. That's when they disengage and say, I don't feel safe here, but I need a paycheck. And so I'm going to try to hang on to my job.
Right.
And maybe they're taking care of their mental health on the side. Maybe they're not. But don't put it all on your employees to say, okay, because I've seen this happen in my previous corporate days, where leaders will say, use your vacation, use your vacation, use your vacation. But you're looking at your agenda and you're looking at all the deliverables you have for your end. And you're like, but if I use my vacation, I'm not going to, when we're looking at synchronous work, I'm not going to be able to get these stakeholders. I'm not going to be able to deliver on this. My merit increase is going to be lower. My bonus is going to be lower. And I really want that money so I can go on that vacation because I feel so burnt out.
It's a cycle. And this is what I'm saying. Organizations, when they really take stock of their structure, half the time, if not more, it's a setup. It's a trap.
It is a trap. And I want to talk about the radical responsibility that the leadership team needs to hold in if your people aren't taking vacation, if your people are burned out, if your people aren't communicating, if they are disengaged, leadership did something wrong.
Absolutely.
You have to start with leadership because you're the one creating that structure. Talk about the companies, like there's so many tech companies, unlimited PTO. Okay, you have unlimited PTO, but do people actually get to be off on their PTO? Do you actually have a structure in which people can take that PTO and disengage, or are they expected to work on their PTO and vacation? Do you have a required minimum? Because we have such a culture of work in the United States that people won't take it if they're not forced to. And so what are you holding in responsibility as the leader for how your teams are showing up? Because it starts with you.
Yeah. And how is what you're saying, like, take your vacation, we value work-life balance, how is that misaligned to what you're doing?
Yes.
Oh gosh.
Because you might be saying that, but you're working late at night, sending emails at 11 p.m., booking, early morning check-ins, and doing all this to create that that workflow, for one, but also as the model leader, people are watching you. They know that if they want to get to your level, that's one of the reasons why I opted out of the corporate world, because I was just I could not find role models. I just
representation matters.
Sacrificing all these things. And so especially when I became a mom, I was like, no, I got twins. I'm not bringing my double breast pump to the site and male dominated environment. And some people did do that, and people were walking in on them, and we didn't, in our corporate office, we had a room for that, but at the site we didn't. And so there were all these things that it was just like the world kept telling me I don't fit in here.
Yeah.
Eventually you believe them.
Yeah. It's again, I don't mean to be rude or insulting, but it's a trap.
And so let's
it's a trap.
Positive note. Let's shift to a positive note. So what we are here to do is to help you.
Yes.
Instead of creating a trap, deliberately creating a system where everyone thrives.
Yes.
Where it's human-centered. So we're inviting you in to reimagine.
Yes.
Because I have seen organizations or parts of businesses where the morale was super low, and a good leader did step in and was able to create systemic change.
Right.
And one of the most inclusive leaders that comes to my mind was a white male. And he's the one who really embodied that Maya Angelou quote for me, which is, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll really remember how you made them feel. And he was that for me. When he was present in a meeting, when he was you just felt that he was there. You felt that he was listening to you. You felt that he cared on a deep level, that he knew you. Just really trying to get to know the human behind the title.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're here to do. We're here to help you become those inspiring leaders. Guess what? You don't have to work as hard either. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to work as hard.
If you do it right, you cut your time down to half. You really do.
You need to get there, but once you're there, everything becomes easier.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's super important to highlight, because so many people don't want to engage in this work because it feels like extra work. It feels like piling on. Like, I already can't keep up with all these things. How am I supposed to do this? If you create a space in which your team is thriving and showing up and engaged, it's not as heavy of a lift, right? Every time you have to move in, quote unquote, you don't have to ever move into that power and control, something went off the rails. Something went wrong. There's an opportunity to resolve the thing that is causing you to think you have to micromanage now.
Right.
And so go back, what happened? Check in with the humans. What do they need? What are their bottlenecks? What are their obstacles? And then remove them. That's way easier than trying to just push people past burnout. It's not going to work.
And I can tell you, as a career coach, most of these people have good intentions. And the thing that they need to thrive is usually so easy. It's free, right? Like we like cost-effective
Like
solutions.
free, yeah.
Usually free, right? If people are asking for raises and all these kind of things, that's just a symptom that the system is broken as well. You don't have to, because like that's one of the reasons I left HR is because we were just so always focused on compensation. But the reason we were so focused on compensation is because people needed justification for why they were sacrificing their life for the
Right.
company,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so
Absolutely.
when you were truly happy and connected to your work, you're not complaining about salary anymore. You're like, you know what, I've seen other companies and I am happy here. And I know I can take my time off. I know I can have the lifestyle I want. And
Right.
so that extra $20,000 doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
And it may not for some people, but for others it does. And I think that that's the importance of what inclusion means to people, or even equity means to people, because that's not the same thing for everybody. Different people are going to have different checklists of what being included means to them.
Exactly.
They have different needs, different desires. And I think normalizing that not every company can be for every person, and not every person can be for every company. And that's okay.
Yeah.
There is plenty to go around.
Absolutely.
That's okay. But if you notice that your company is all white men, for example, not to pick on y'all, we love you, but if you notice that, then it's,
so I'm saying
your company's not for everyone. But if you're saying your company is not for people who are underrepresented, then think about how that's impacting your business as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because if you want your customers to be diverse, you want to go into new markets you don't understand, you're going to need diversity to really understand the pain points.
right.
And also, like, it's something that can, I mean, this shouldn't be your why, but it's something that can get you in trouble down the road. It can be a PR crisis. It can be a marketing crisis. It can be. And so, you know, it's 2020, it's almost 2023. And so I'm already in 2023, by the way. I think I said that a couple times, but
You might as well be.
I'm already out in 2022, but it's 2023. And like, that's it. Make this the year that you really show up intentionally.
Yes. That's the part that leadership needs to understand, is the intention needs to be good. It needs to be I'm not going to say pure. I'm not going to say that. The intention needs to be wholesome and authentic, because a lot of times it is, oh, you said I need to diversify so I can get into other markets. That's not a good intention.
No.
That motivation right there, that's not a no. You should be serious about getting into other markets, because your service is going to support and elevate something, not just because of your benefit and wanting to make better bottom lines, but the intention needs to be authentic and wholesome. Because
one of the questions I really like to ask my clients when it comes to this, like finding their authentic why, or their passion for DEI, or their passion for whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's an underrepresented group they're trying to help, is what really breaks your heart. Like, what is really breaking your heart, like when it comes to DEI?
Right.
And how does your business help to solve these problems?
Right.
In whatever ways, like, get creative, but really start from what authentically you will, because that's the thing, you need motivation to stay on the path. And motivation cannot be manufactured.
Right. Neither can connection. So that question too, for me, really is asking, how do you see yourself as connected to or a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because some people will answer and say, well, since DEI is a practice or an approach, here's what I think, right? Completely void of any connection. But like I said before, DEI is getting back to the human of since it's in the workspace of our workspaces, right? So if you get certain, and then, certain answers that you get, you're like, yeah, this person doesn't even recognize that they are DEI.
Mhm.
Yes.
and they're not even paying attention to it.
Or they think of it, their knee-jerk reaction is to think of racism and to
Yes.
say,
Yeah.
I'm not racist.
I'm not racist. It's like, oh God, no one
might
said
be not
anything about race.
You might be not racist, but we all have internalized racism within us
Yeah.
because we all grew up in a racist society.
Right.
Right? Like that is just a
Yeah.
fact. And so, I've said this before, it's really about aligning, looking at what your similarities are to the system
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
racism.
Mhm. Mhm.
And not to feel guilty about your privilege,
No.
but understand that some
Understand.
things,
Right.
like we all have challenges in life, but some things were easier for you.
And to please also recognize that privilege is divergent. Like it's what your privilege is
Mhm.
doesn't mean that I don't have the same or similar,
Yes.
Mhm.
right?
It's intersectional. Yeah.
Right. There are differences to privilege because I think in America, particularly when we think about the standard of privilege being white privilege,
Yes.
in some cases, I would never want that.
Yep.
Mm.
I'm good not having that standard. I have other things that are privileges for me that people can't, that white people may not have. So, I think we need to also recognize that there's a lot of spectrum in what we're talking about and how we need to operate.
Yep.
And what we need to value and honor in that, again, the difference and levels of continuity and different intersectionalities.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Because then we're not painting a group with a broad brush either and
Right.
saying, okay, because then when people start thinking from that perspective, everyone in this group is marginalized. You
Mhm.
start, it's again that superiority, that power dynamic
Mhm.
where you are now speaking down to someone or being overly sensitive,
Right.
and then that group, you know that you're being treated differently. You
Differently.
sense that. And so, and also for myself, like I'm a woman of color, but I recognize that I have a lot of privilege. And
Yes.
so I understand what it's like to be specifically an Indian woman in a way like, that no one else of any other group can understand.
Right.
But
Right.
at the same time, I have proximity to power in a
Mhm.
lot of different ways. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I might have got there, my journey here might have been a little bit different than others,
Right.
but it doesn't mean like we just say, okay, these people are not privileged, these people are privileged. It's
No.
intersectional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the thing right there in what you're talking about earlier, Dr. Kerriann, is acknowledging your connection to it.
Right.
You can't begin to heal something, you can't begin to work on something or to grow in something until you acknowledge
Knowledge.
what is there or
Mhm.
isn't there, right?
Mhm.
Unchecked bias exists because it's not been checked. You're not aware of what's happening. So until you can connect to what is my connection to diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Yep.
how do I show up on this and stop talking about it like it's something external to you, we won't be able to make moves in big ways. So once people start connecting to, okay, this is how this shows up for me, then people can start to see beyond their own noses and making systemic change that needs to happen.
Yes.
So how are you connected to DEI as a human first?
Yes.
You are a human, you're not a robot. How are you connected to DEI? And so on that note, that might be one question you can take away from today as a leader or even as an underrepresented group watching this. How are you uniquely connected to DEI? What is your where are your barriers? Where is your, like, I draw from standpoint theory a lot, like what can you see that nobody else can see?
Mhm.
So we all think we have to be experts in this to start the work, but no, you have a unique lens.
Yep.
There's something you can see that none of us on this panel can even see right now, and you can share with us.
Yeah.
And so start with, how are you connected to DEI? What else, Dr. Kerriann, am I maybe missing when we think about an easy place for people to start that might be, low effort, high impact? Of course, we mentioned connecting with a coach, connecting with someone in this space to help you understand where your gaps are, understand what goals you need to set. But what else might be the low hanging fruit that where people can start to see changes right away?
Yeah, I think if you start with just those three things that I talked about earlier, how you feel,
Yeah.
how do things sound to you, and how do things look to you, right?
Mm.
Like taking a personal kind of stance in what do those things look, sound, and feel like now? And then how do you want them to look, sound, and feel like in true practice, in true application,
Yes.
right? Of things that are inclusive, of things that are actually psychologically safe.
Yes.
Because I think we're doing a good job with the diversity stuff. We've
Mhm.
done pretty good with having diverse things. Great. The equity is still a little shaky, and inclusion really isn't there yet.
Mm-mm.
Places are really not as inclusive as they think they are.
Yeah.
Because for me, inclusivity, a big part of that is the psych safety. And
Yeah.
that's not happening. Accessibility is happening in
Yeah.
many places. And again, it depends on the capacity of the organization,
Yeah.
what they're able to do in-house versus connect outside for certain development or resourcing. So those are that one, I think, just I like your point about where do you connect? Where can you connect right
Mhm.
now? Where do you see yourself looking at things differently? And then those 3 points, the
Yeah.
look, sound, feel now, and what you would like it to look,
Yeah.
sound, and feel like. Yeah.
I
I
really
love
like
that.
that
'Cause it's really
forward look.
creating a vision. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we close out today, if you are a employer or a company or on a leadership team and some of these red flags showed up as you're like, oh, that's interesting. Yes, call Dr. Kerriann. You can also call Jasleen and I. We are doing a free DEI evaluation for companies right now. So head over to our website, jobdisruptors.com, and click on I'm hiring, and you can fill out our questionnaire and we'll be in contact with you. If you are a job seeker and you are looking for companies that are prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and go over to jobdisruptors.com and click on Hire Me, and you can sign up for our job board. We have a whole bunch of really interesting positions that are listed right now that we're trying to get filled for companies that are great places to work. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can also follow us here so that you can get notifications of everything happening. And next month, we will be diving into unpacking bias and being a culture add and not a culture fit. So make sure that you watch out for those events upcoming. Dr. Kerriann, is there anything that you would like to share before we go?
Sure. Folks can reach out to me as well as they please. parrotconsultingllc.org is where you can find me, or on Instagram. Everybody has to have an Instagram these days. Dr.Kerry_P is where I am. But yeah, I'm available. And LinkedIn, definitely find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn nonstop. So folks can connect with me there. And starting to put together our coaching program. So we're already having applications for our coaching program starting in the new year for managers or leaders, folks who are interested in just getting out of the burnout and trauma and figuring out a different approach through DEI for their workspaces. So you can connect with me as well.
Perfect. We're so glad that you came with us today. Jasleen, is there anything that you would like to add before we close today?
Not too much. I genuinely really enjoyed the conversation today. I feel like it gives me a new energy to take away with me into this work because it is hard work. So if you're in this space and you're passionate about DEI as well, please share this with people so that they can, start to marinate on how they're going to connect to DEI because we really want to create that ripple effect in the world. So please share this, and we will be putting this into a podcast format soon as well. And so we know that not everyone can be here live on the LinkedIn. So stay tuned for that because you'll be able to access all of these via podcast.
Yeah, starts January 4th, actually. It'll start with the launch event that Dr. Kerriann was also a part of when we first launched a while ago. So those podcasts will start coming out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts January 4th.
Cool.
So follow our page for announcements about that as well. So yes.
Awesome.
Well, thank you everybody for joining today. Like Jasleen said, please share this with anybody who you think might find it valuable. And we will look forward to seeing you after the new year.
Yes, stay safe.